we're back with the number one hockey show as voted on by me. It's the Stevie Nicks Hockey Experience, and we have another special guest today. With me always is Mike Larkin, my producer. And today we got a special guest today. We got Kevin from the Long Island Hockey History Twitter account. And so thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to talk hockey with all of you.
Awesome. So I guess we'll just get right into it. So first I want to, obviously you're an Islanders fan, right?
Oh, absolutely. Since birth, I grew up in Syosset, so about, no traffic, about 15 minutes to the Coliseum.
Awesome. So talk about how you became an Islanders fan in the beginning, in general.
I mean, definitely my dad just taking me to games basically since I could walk. We had, I was born in 86, so probably about 93 or 94 is when we started going. And obviously we had tickets for the kind of the worst years of the Islanders there in the mid and late 90s. But that was a lot of fun. And honestly really just kind of grew up there, just going to tons of games all the time since we lived so close. And, I guess tickets weren't too bad a price back then. And I always think the funny story is my dad is he's convinced that either I learned to read or my first word where I first read some words was driving into the Islander game one night. I guess I read something off the parking price list or whatever on the boots there, and he always tells me, he's like, all of a sudden, somebody from the back was asking, in the back of the car was asking what this meant. And so really just kind of grew up around the island and the Islanders.
Did you have season tickets?
Yeah, or it was half seasons, but we went to probably like 15, 20 games every year for a while, and unfortunately stuck it out too in like 97, 98 when the team was just really, really awful.
Okay, and what made you start the Long Island Hockey History page on Twitter?
Yeah, just kind of, I guess not this past season because obviously the Islanders were in the playoffs and it was pretty exciting, but the year before when, Tavares, we thought he might be leaving and Garth Snow was still running the team, and honestly, Twitter was always a little bit crazy, but that year was particularly, I think, stressful for everybody, and just kind of a really awful season with how they fell apart the last few months. And so I really just started like looking for other stuff and kind of finding other stuff to do. And it was really just driven by, all right, I was really pretty fed up with what was going on currently. So I was like, oh, let me look into the history of it. And I guess, again, born in 86, I missed all the cup years and all that. But, I've always heard about that stuff. And I guess as I started just kind of looking back and finding old articles, it kind of snowballed and got more and more interesting. And I would find something interesting that, I hadn't heard of. Obviously, we've all heard of the cups and all the stories with that, but it'd be something before that or after that would be really interesting. And then I started researching a little bit on the Long Island Ducks, who played at Comac Arena in the 60s. And man, the stories that came out of that place are just absolutely wild. And it kind of, to me at least, it explains some of the wild atmosphere with the Islanders at the Coliseum. All the fans there are notoriously, very excited about all the games when it comes to playoff time. So it just kind of, it's almost like, I was kind of getting into it and I was like, just, kind of would find an interesting story and then find another interesting one, and it kind of snowballed like that.
Okay, because you're a history, like me, you're a history buff, obviously. That's kind of how I found the page, and obviously with my YouTube page and all that, we kind of started talking to each other back and forth, and I'm interested to know how do you collect your material?
So it's mostly Newsday archives. To some extent, there are local newspapers that help a little bit more, going back to like the Ducks and the Rovers. But honestly, it's really the Newsday archive is pretty amazing, and the New York Times to some extent as well. Newsday pretty much covered the Islanders every single day from the start of the franchise. So that's really helpful. And I got to ask you. So you've got, I don't know, it seems like every game or every important game to me. How did your video collection kind of come to be?
Well, it started out just through trading. It starts out through. I started very small. I only had a couple of games, and before I know it, I got in touch with people, and we started. You share lists, and the collection just started to grow. And I've been doing this for about I don't know 8 years now. I think just collecting Islander games and having them on DVD, and I started the YouTube channel because I like you. I wanted to kind of share the history and really let people see what that those moments were like actually happening and bring life to them. One person actually said to me, and it really did it for me, was that he said, "Thank you for bringing the dynasty to life and bringing those games to life." And that's what I try to do. I try to show those moments and show those games, try to bring them to life and try to show them to people who maybe haven't gotten a chance to see, like you were born after the Cups, or just people who want to relive them or whatever. So that's kind of why I did that.
Yeah, and it's great to see because a lot of that video is just not out there. I mean, I'm sure NHL Network will play Tonelli to Nystrom occasionally and kind of some of the bigger games, but I mean, just the amount of stuff you have out there is awesome. And I think there was one time, I guess, I don't know who tweeted it, but we sent it out there, and it was a video of just like a Islanders Jets game from like '94, and somebody, I guess from Winnipeg, saw it and was like, "Oh my God, like I was at this game. It was like one of the last Jets games," and like they were really excited to see it. So it's neat to be able to, I guess for me, see it the first time, and obviously people enjoy seeing it, for themselves so many years later, especially because, obviously since, I don't know, the digital age started and the NHL has tons of, the full game, every highlight is up on YouTube now. But prior to, I don't know, 2005, or I'm not sure when it started, but prior to that, I mean, stuff just really isn't out there. And I think it's great that you have all that stuff out there.
And I've had to fight with the NHL too. They've given me a hard time sometimes by putting games up, but I've also found that the Islanders are one of the more ignored teams when the NHL is putting stuff out, or when anyone is talking about historical things in general. The Islanders kind of get ignored, and the dynasty kind of gets the shaft. Everybody wants to talk about the Oilers, and everybody talks about the Canadian teams, and the Islanders kind of got overlooked with the dynasty. So I find it that way. I'm helping to do that as well. And obviously yours channel is doing that also, which I really appreciate. And I wanted to talk about some of the other teams that you cover also, because it's Long Island hockey history. It's not just the Islanders. So I wanted you to just get a summary of the different teams that you cover. Maybe we could start. We're talking about the Long Island Ducks and who they were and what they were about and what they did and all that.
Yeah, so, I kind of, once I started reading about the Ducks, I was like, all right, I didn't want to focus solely on the Islanders because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. So you had, initially in 1959, when the Comac Arena was built, they put a minor league hockey team there, and it was the New York Rovers, who had previously, some years before that in the 30s and 40s, played at the Garden. So they were kind of reincarnated and put in Comac as kind of suburbia was expanding and being created. And obviously, so you had the Rovers out there. They were pretty bad. Things didn't really go too well. So after a few years, they kind of got new owners, changed the name to the Ducks. And that team really took off, not only on the ice, but the fans absolutely loved it. They ended up winning an Eastern League title. I forget, I think that was 65 or 66. And there's just I want to get into it more. I haven't dug into it too much on my Twitter so far, but there's all kinds of stories that come out of it. I don't know, I guess where the truth is, but a lot of it is, they had they didn't really have glass like rinks do now. They had chicken wire, and you'd have players going into the stands and fighting. Obviously, tons of fights on the ice, and the fans would abuse the visiting teams and the referees, and it just sounds like a really wild time. And unfortunately, when the Islanders came along in '72, the Ducks kind of people forgot about them, and they basically ended up going out of business. But obviously to the benefit of the Islanders and all the successes they had. So it's really, to me, it's a pretty clear precursor to the Islanders. Of the Ducks they have kind of the rabid fans like the Islanders do. They went from, kind of almost being bankrupt to winning a title and then bankrupt again. And obviously the Islanders, with all their owner issues, have had titles, but also similar problems. So I kind of see a lot of the Islanders in the Ducks, and it's pretty interesting to me to kind of hear all the stories about, what all happened out there.
John Brophy was one of their legendary players, right? He was the inspiration for Reggie Dunlop and Slapshot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, absolutely. And I haven't gotten a chance. I had a busy winter, but Greg Inkpen just wrote a book on Brophy, and I know there's a lot of Ducks material in there, and I have to give that a read and get more on that.
So talk about the Long Island Cougars. Who are the Long Island Cougars, and what were they about?
So they came up in the wake of the Ducks folding, and from what I've seen, I'm not really sure kind of how it went down, but the Ducks essentially folded, and the next year somebody who had been associated somewhat with the Ducks started up the Cougars. So it was the same idea playing in Comac. It was a minor league team there, and they actually, they brought Brophy in as the coach, who was the fan favorite from the Ducks years, and they tried to make a go of it, but they only lasted about, I think it was 2 or 3 seasons. And they still had the same kind of, tons of fights. Obviously, with Brophy the coach, it was probably a tough squad and that sort of thing going on, but they only lasted a few years, as far as I know.
And also, one of the teams I noticed you cover is a team that only lasted 1 season, but they're from the RHI, the Long Island Jaws. But have you found out anything interesting about the Long Island Jaws yet, or have you really gotten into that much?
I haven't gotten into that much. They were only around for a season, so most of their articles too, they were a summer league team. So I anticipate this summer I'll probably be able to tap more into that, as I get into like June and July, because that's when they kind of show up in my article searches. But I actually had one of the guys who was, I think the coach reached out to me on Twitter, or somebody involved with the team. So I didn't initially have the Jaws in the byline of the Twitter account. He was like, "Hey, do you know the Jaws?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I went to those games too as a kid." So I'm like, I got to add them in and get some info on them. But hopefully that'll be a summer project.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to see those tweets. So I got to ask you, going back to the Islanders, who is your favorite current Islander player, and who's your favorite player of all time?
Current Islander, I don't know. I can't say I've latched on to anybody yet, but obviously Barzal is, amazing to watch. And it's been just a really enjoyable team, I think, to watch this year. There's nobody who's, I would say I wouldn't like or anything like that. All time, just going to the Islanders in the mid 90s was absolutely Ziggy Palffy. Just, that guy. I mean, he was the team for a number of years there. He'd score 40 or 50, and I don't even know if the second highest scorer on the team would even have 40 or 50 points. But he was always really exciting to watch, and so that would probably be my my all-time favorite. Obviously not necessarily the best player who's ever played for the team, but definitely one of the good ones.
He's definitely one of my favorites, Ziggy Stardust, I gotta say. Definitely was. He's one of the more overlooked players in the team history, pretty much because of the era that he played in. But he was a good player, and if he played on a good team, he would have had 100 points those years. So I mean, he really was an absolutely fantastic player.
Yeah, and I wish we could have seen, in the early 2000s when they obviously went to the playoffs a few times. If he had been on those teams, that would have been really interesting to see him and Yashin and those guys.
Oh, absolutely. They would have done some damage, I'm sure. What's up? So tell me about the icon. Is there a specific reason you have Kasparaitis and Malikov as your channel icon?
I guess it's just kind of, like I said, that whole 90s Islander aesthetic, but I thought it was a funny image. I tried to, I'm kind of proud of my background image that has, I don't know, 30 guys throughout kind of different eras of the team, and I tried to pick all kind of the memorable and interesting images there. I was thinking about the other day, I'm like, man, I'm trying to be kid friendly, but I've got the kind of the famous photo of Trottier flipping double birds, so I may need to adjust that one. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of a funny image, and I'd probably I've kind of been meaning to rotate different images in there and just kind of forgot about that, but maybe I'll do that now.
They put those photos on trading cards. I think I have a couple of trading cards with that picture on it too, which is very interesting.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, so I found it interesting that you had that as your channel icon photo. So far since you've been running this page, what's the most interesting piece of information you've learned since you started?
I just love all the kind of like the little tidbits that didn't get picked up, or obviously 20, 30 years after the fact we were forgotten about. I guess my favorite little thing that I've noticed was there was some article from the 70s, obviously reporter interviewing players in the locker room after the game, and they're kind of writing in first person, and they write about they're talking to Bobby Nystrom, and I guess it was a tough game or something, so the reporter's kind of talking about his conversation with Nystrom in the locker room, and just very casually he's like, yeah, and then Nystrom reaches back, pulls out a cigarette, lights one up, keeps talking to me, and I'm like, man, that's just, that's such a different era to think, Sidney Crosby or somebody, lighting up a cigarette in the dressing room these days. So I don't know, that's just kind of one of the neat little things I've found so far. And like I said, I got to post more of it, but all the wild stuff with the Ducks of just, the fans would abuse the referees or the players, and so there's a lot of interesting stuff that's kind of been, I don't even know if people knew about it at the time, but I guess it's fun to be reminded of.
Absolutely. You know what I keep thinking about? Imagine how good Mike Bossy would have been if he didn't smoke during his career.
Oh goodness, and he was, he's one of the best all-time scorers anyway.
I mean, it's just, you're right. Like you said, it was definitely a different era. But I love that 70s stuff, though. That's awesome. The stuff you find. So
and I think the one thing I'm disappointed in, and it's just how is what it is the Newsday archive. It's kind of like pictures and articles up until 1985, and then you get to 1985, and I guess everything went digital, and it's all just text. And I'm like, man, I still wish they had the images up there from the 90s and the 80s, because it's hard to find from 85 to 2000 any kind of pictures, whereas obviously 2000 pretty much everything's on the internet at that point.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a lot of cool things in those years too about the Islanders. But you know what? You do a great job though. So it all comes together pretty well. Today is obviously a special day, and you obviously talked about it. Today being the anniversary of the Bobby Nystrom goal that won the first Stanley Cup. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just about what that means to you and its historical significance. Obviously, it's the biggest goal in the history of the franchise. So obviously, it was there is a reason that I picked today to speak to you. So talk a little bit about that, about the famous 7-11 goal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, biggest goal in the history of the franchise, and just really kind of catapulted everything after that, and was really probably like a huge kind of euphoria, not only of winning the cup, but of just being finally the Islanders did it, because they had so many playoff runs in the mid to late 70s and had done pretty well. It wasn't just, this team didn't come out of nowhere. It was almost like they finally made it over the hill, and obviously everything that came after that was unbelievable. So, again, it's really, I think, to me, that day, and then I know it's not a cup, but the David Volek Day is another fun one, which was, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's just obviously a huge day for the Islanders.
And I also noticed today they don't have anything past May 24th. They've never played a game past May 24th, I don't believe.
They have not. Yeah, today was also, so obviously Nystrom Day, and then the other game that was today was when they lost to the Canadiens in '93 and got eliminated. So yeah, they've never played a game into June, never past May 24th. So hopefully, I was hoping we'd do it this year, but maybe Luke can retool and we'll get there next year.
It's the sky's the limit. I think that this team has a very, very bright future. Speaking of big Islander moments, what's your favorite Islander moment in the history? And whether it's something you witnessed live or just something that you've seen on tape or whatever, what's your favorite Islanders moment in the history?
I guess, obviously not having lived through the Cup years, that I've seen personally, I think is probably the Bates penalty shot. I just remember being, like 15, 16 years old, and I had gone to Game 3 at the Coliseum with my dad. So, because I was like, Dad, we've been going to these games for 7-8 years now, and man, we got to be at the first one, the first playoff game since '94. We've got to be there. So we were at Game 3, and then I just remember, we didn't go to Game 4, but just watching the Bates penalty shot at home and just like screaming my head off and being so excited about that. And I would say, honestly, this year sweeping the Penguins is probably number 2 at this point. I mean, that's had no idea that series would go that way at all, and it kind of feels great. After the Penguins, they knocked us out, I guess it was 2013 or so, and obviously that team has had a lot of success, so to be able to do that was pretty special.
So it's interesting you brought up this season. Talk a little bit more about this year's team. Can you put it into a historical perspective, what they accomplished this year, or is it too early for that?
Well, I mean, you've got certainly the records of, this was the first sweep since, I think it was 83 or 84, whenever it was. It was the most points the team has had since 84 or 85. So, I mean, just statistically, it's unbelievable. Obviously, nobody thought where they would go at the start of the season. Not sure where it would rank all time, because unfortunately they did get swept by Carolina. So it's not a particularly lengthy run, but, I think it's something people really, really look back on, and probably, like a certain kind of generation of fans like me, I guess, look at the Leafs series in 2001, or you might look at 1993. It'll probably just be another one of those years that's just really special to people, and hopefully they can build off of it.
Definitely, I think that this is a good place to start from. I think that because this year was so unexpected, also people did not expect them to do as well as they did. I think that you have a position now where you're in place to go and do great things, because just having Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz there and just pulling off a season like this, I think that they can only go further and have even them more success down the road. I think it sets them up, puts them in a very good situation moving forward. So, what's your of all the things that you've come across this season and covering the Twitter page and doing all this thing, what's the one anecdote or what's your favorite thing that you've come across so far that you've had since you've taken this page over?
Well, definitely the Nystrom locker room thing was. I just thought that was really interesting, and just some of the way back history of. I came across. I guess they were starting. Nassau County had ideas of building a coliseum or an arena as far back as 1956, which is kind of wild because obviously it didn't actually get built until 71, 72. So just kind of interesting to think how things might have been different if they had actually gone through with that and how that would have affected the Ducks and then obviously the Islanders coming along later. So just kind of the real history to see that is definitely interesting. And, again, like I was saying before, a lot of the parallels, but just between the Ducks and the Islanders and kind of history repeats itself sometimes with bad owners and good owners and all that sort of thing.
All right. And as we're wrapping up here, is there anything you want to add? Is there anything else you want to say that you maybe haven't gotten to cover yet?
Yeah, I guess if I could plug myself real quick, I am going to be starting a blog with it. So there'll be a website and kind of use it in conjunction with Twitter just to be able to, if there's something I need to elaborate on in more than, 200 characters or whatever it is, to try and do that. And I can't really talk any details at this point, but I have a friend who does Islanders stuff, and he is going to do a podcast that I think really all I can say without kind of getting in trouble is it'll just be some type of Islander history thing. So I'm just kind of helping him with the research. He's going to, I think, do everything else. But obviously I'll be plugging that on Twitter. So just keep an eye out for those things.
All right. So thanks for coming on with us. Appreciate it. And stay in touch with us and look forward to seeing more of your tweets.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to seeing more videos, and thanks for having me, guys.
All right, no problem. Thanks a lot.